Hi, my name is Chloe Bruce. I am a former gas journalist and business journalist specialising in Russia and the former Soviet Union. And I've been filming this YouTube channel for a while now, well over a month I think, in which I don't just shed light on London, I place it in the context of foreign policy, Russia relationships, the war in Ukraine and Russia, and between those two countries. And I've also talked about a future of Britain that's extremely unpleasant, which is a hasty way of managing society by diagnosing them with various mental health problems. And they can never really make up which one is going to be the worst for you and chop and change their mind all the time. And you can see this in your notes. Endless speculation, it could be this one, it could be that one. They can never make up their minds. And this is in the context of not just stigma, but outright lies about their patients in medical notes. And I've discussed how I was venomously lied about in my medical notes, and also the dangerous habit they have of trying to misprescribe anti-epileptic medications that can cause fetal abnormalities, death of the baby, death of the mother while pregnant, brain damage of the mother, and all kinds of other unpleasant situations for them medically. I was diagnosed, I've discussed, with schizophrenia in my late 20s, good 23, 24 years ago, and I was then given a diagnosis of bipolar affective disorder in Vienna, and then it went back to schizophrenia in London. And they've also speculated, even recently, about schizoaffective disorder, and they never acknowledged the seizure part of this condition, if it exists even. And certainly they ignore the co-occurring conditions such as epilepsy and other various physical illnesses, which are probably more accountable for the stress along with PTSD than any kind of genuine mental health condition called schizophrenia, which I have said belongs in Nazi history. The more you look at it, the less they know about it. They haven't really said we don't know what it is, but it's pure speculation. And if they go by appearances, nationality, race, as they have in my case, they seem to be anti-Slavic and anti-Jewish. I'm a Christian, but I have Slavic Jew from my mother line. And these racial notes were put in, references to race, and a clear allegation that I must speak Russian only because I'm Russian, when in fact I learnt it in school from the age of 14 and graduated in Russian studies, including some language and literature, at the London School of Slavonic East European Studies, then went on to have a scholarship at the London School of Economics for a political science programme specialising in Russian history and politics, modern day politics. And then I went into journalism, and when I became ill and was on medication, I switched to a PhD on Russian natural gas politics, and also re-entered journalism working for Jane's, and I wrote on Russian energy politics in these military intelligence magazines they have, before being taken ill permanently. And I'm now in a council flat, which I've discussed, and the homelessness situation in Britain, and also I just have been written off, quite literally, long-term sick. Anyway, today, as you can see from the title, it's been widely covered, the military situation in Eurasia and Europe. And I'm pretty sure it's correct to say it's Eurasian war and European. I don't think it could really just be called the First War in Europe. I feel a bit mad, but I'm pretty sure it must be Eurasian war if you consider Russian geography and the debate about whether it's Asia or Europe. And it's, I should imagine it usually categorises itself as Eurasian. That dynamic can't be taken out of Russia. It's not really wholly European, even if it were to join the EU, the Eurasian member of the European Union, and this would be part of the debate. I'm pretty sure, feeling unhinged, that it's just a war in Europe for some, but it's not. It must be surely a Europe and Eurasian war, especially now that Ukraine has entered Russia. And in Russia now has a kind of Blitz, and implied in the title, a pun on the song that I've mentioned in previous videos, Puttin on the Ritz. I think it's a crooner song, pre-Second World War crooner song. So today I'm going to, it's in this context that's been widely covered, the dynamics of that particular invasion. And I'm today going to talk a bit more about London. While all this bombing's going on in that part of the world, we are still embedded in stagnation when it comes to, at least media's reporting change. And I can't see much change from my point of view personally. There's still talk of yet more cuts for, say, pensioners, but people on benefits like me, trying to get people back to work when they're not even welcome, like me, in the job, and just missing the point. I've called this the ostrich policy, a policy of burying their heads in the sand, and they're still doing it, and the media is just cherry picking what it wants to say, not really covering global events or the UK economy in any thorough and technical predictive manner. So today I'm just going to elaborate on some of these thoughts and talk about the latest situation here in London. So with thoughts of the Israeli Bronze Age jar that was broken, I thought that like this jar, a country's durability is smashed if you have had bad leadership. I've repeatedly said that the UK cannot defend itself adequately just by a chat between Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, and his German counterpart, as was the case recently. They have instead, instead of just having these treaties, you have to minimise their own regime hypocrisy. And sure, as I think is maybe an effort now in Germany, they are trying to acknowledge all sides, but also to take the hypocrisy out of politicians who might have an angle towards the far right, from my very poor general knowledge of the German political situation. But they have to minimise, particularly in the case of the UK, regime hypocrisy, and ensure that institutes such as law and the media are as strong as possible to uphold the ideal of democracy, rather than the ideology that reveres the house owner, the homeowner, when in fact it is, as far as I have read on online searches, it is a near 50-50 division, 50% with a home, 50% who don't own their home, and I understand. And even if all owners are busy having the picnic of their lifetime with this great property that's going to go up and up and up, and safe as houses they call it, while they're having their lovely picnic, a percentage of disgruntled renters is high enough to affect policy from the bottom up by insisting on rules being followed. It was probably never really in the rule book to say landlords could behave this way, or the councils could behave this way, and rents could be this high, and properties this abnormally enlarged as anything to invest in as a sure thing. So in the UK, showing off about your ability to take out a mortgage, which is just bizarre. I've never heard anything more bizarre than bragging about debt. I heard one lawyer say, "Oh, if only I knew normal people in the family with a mortgage and a house." It's just absurd. And yes, if you could call that a decent lawyer. Anyway, it's just the most unpleasant email I've ever read, especially I didn't have a mortgage, and we all know where they were putting the boot in. And so, sort of, your ability to take out a mortgage here is like the song I alluded to, Putin on the Ritz, in title. It's like a show of extravagance. I think that's what putting on the Ritz means in the song. You're showing off and trying to seem as sort of elite as possible in terms of clothing in particular. So they're sort of showing off their properties as they would the attire once. They think a home ownership makes them look better than other people who are slogging it out just as much but didn't have the gift of old money. And they might have even slogged it out even more, not wanting to enter a bizarre property deal with the council, as I've discussed Angela Rayner, whoever her name is, Angela Rayner, the Deputy PM, seems to have done. So I have commented on a fascist element in previous videos in UK governance and institutes. It is the typical fascist complex of eggs in a basket theory. As they cite energy projects, this is the government and media, with their maniacal behaviour towards the sort of energy part and the home ownership part. Energy projects and home ownership as mainstays for people in this economy, with little citation of all the technological innovations and little on how job incentives will work. At the Amazon checkout basket, I no longer have clothes in it because small means medium in the sizing, and I only fit, they're very rarely sold to extra small, when I really, even when I'm at the upper end of my weight or overweight. I have been prone to high cholesterol. The moment I go a bit overweight, I get high cholesterol. And I can't be overweight just because their sizing is faulty. And so even with my upper weight, I can sometimes feel that in a few pounds' time, the 2 extra smalls are going to be too loose around the waist. And the same goes for all budget shops in the UK, at least last time I looked, unless you consider Primark, which sells 2 extra small. And would this be a monopoly, that they're the only ones selling sufficiently small sizes? In any case, their 2 extra small is an extra small, maybe. And forgive me, but bras and knickers are also a problem here. But Amazon, as an international company, gives me pleasure, as it has also invested in a vast array of other products. I won't be buying their clothing again after what I've been through. After I've complained, they actually send sizes too high after you've complained about the sizing issue in a bizarre obstinance. But I love many of their products, and as such, it's not just the clothes basket, it is a company that can resort to other parts of its innovative approach to selling items. It is also a bad idea to erode parliamentary plurality by having such a strong convergence of ideas between the main two political parties, Labour and Tory. As the song 16 Tons, I load 16 tons and what you get is the song. It says, if the right one won't get you, then the left one will. And we can see here in London, in Britain, an equal and opposite fist approach to change in the current demonstrations in the UK. The bottom-up approach through lobbying and diplomacy and voting hasn't worked, and as such, a fist approach seems to have broken out. Also alluding to this song, 16 Tons, it says, I owe my soul to the company's store. This is relevant. We also have a monopoly on services, in our services, as all inquiries, including insurance claims, involve referrals, rude, arrogant referrals that you need a social worker. These, I've discussed in previous videos, are ambiguous about who they are, what they do. They appear to be a private company that occasionally tries to charge you when you don't even know them, have never even heard of them. And I got an apology from social services after they tried to charge me for something that hadn't happened. They're a group of unqualified bandits who sparked the first riot here, the one that led to the catalyst to the other riots, because they were objecting against social services interfering with a family and removing a child. This is not just because we can all understand a child needs protection and sometimes tragically taken away from the people who are looking after them. But what they don't deserve is a social worker being equally bowed as their family, and I can testify this is often the case. Who else would be arrogant enough to think they, without law, without qualifications, without knowledge of medicine, can interfere with a family and not have that response over time when no change happens? As such, it was, I think, in Leeds, the first riots began, and I have now the race riots have begun. I have proof, and I say this in light of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, and I think it's today the outcome of the investigation into the Grenfell Tower fire in London is coming out. I can say this: instead of fixing problems in buildings, council properties as Grenfell was supposed to be, of mould and pipes, gas leaks, CO leaks I've talked about, water pipe problems, the Wandsworth Council of London, here where I am, spends money instead, I can prove this in letters, liaising with social services, who ordered me in a letter to be sectioned in hospital rather than fixing the problems I had complained about. And they tried to give me a medication that would cause brain damage with my particular seizure history, and would damage me if I was pregnant. My baby would be dead. As such, it's impossible for me to conceive with this going on. I will keep pressing this point until they are officially disbanded and in the jail they deserve. They need to be officially dissolved by the government also, who has to put pressure on these menaces in society, who occupy bizarre advocacy services, Citizens Advice Bureau, and all kinds of organisations. If you ring up a basic institute, all you get is a customer service individual psychologising you in a bizarre way. And I've talked about Munchausen media encouraging all these medical wannabes. And about selling my soul, no. If you aren't corrupt too, you aren't welcome. And I'm never going to join into their inappropriate discussions of children. Instead of allowing you to represent yourself in the courts, which I have to do, I'm trying to take various bodies to court, and possibly even the Metropolitan Police, some members of them. You are ready to represent yourself in court because the lawyer isn't there with legal aid, and the Magistrates' Court and Parliamentary Ombudsman refer you to unqualified upstarts such as the Citizens Advice Bureau, even when you are ready and carefully qualified yourself so you could have a bit more empowerment, and they refer you to menaces who have no law, who have actually bankrupted people, nearly bankrupted me, who give bad benefits advice with no maths, no qualifications, no knowledge of the law, and they refer you to them. And I don't know why some TV presenters allude to schizophrenic individuals, sometimes when they've committed a crime, sometimes when they have never committed a crime at all, without considering they are not necessarily themselves not the face of schizophrenia. They themselves might be sitting there, and does it not occur to them, some people might be sitting there thinking they're the schizophrenic look. They wouldn't like that said to them. I checked with ChatGPT, and it said that a social worker qualification here in the UK at least can only be taken after a relevant first degree, a heavy-duty academic degree such as social work degree, and you have to have all the A levels, all the qualifications to enter these degrees. You have to have a social degree and then a sort of further academic qualification in social services to actually practice. Can the government not actually intervene and dissolve these menaces? Are you aware it hurts? Are you aware they're getting away with it because you are encouraging it? All these issues affect our foreign, and I actually wonder where the real qualified social service people are. Can't they get in touch with the media? Can't they get in touch with me and say what they think about this situation? Why are they so silent? I know we've got to creeping totalitarianism, but they don't have to be that quiet on the subject. It hurts. There are children involved. All these issues affect our foreign policy outlook. In 2014, Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a speech, I think it was in 2014, in light of the initial phase of conflict in Ukraine, called the UK, or England at least, titchy, because we are literally titchy, of course. Not just because he, in his view, as far as I can tell, in his speech, or researching it, he was saying he had little standing or influence in international affairs, in foreign policy, that is. And in my opinion, we haven't. I think he might be meaning we haven't got the resources to link economic factors to these foreign policy stances because they don't necessarily trade like that. In other words, to give you an example, for instance, we produce oil and gas in large quantities, but the natural gas isn't intended on the whole for a major export deal. We do export occasionally, I believe, but not much. It's for use here. And this is, of course, in contradistinction to Russia, which is a leading exporter, if not the leading exporter of this fuel. And it was in my thesis that I discussed how this economic factor could present leverage. But what I didn't do is say it was 100% interdependent. I said that it was a sort of interdependent relationship, sometimes strongly in favour of Russia. But what I didn't say was that in relation to the European Union, in terms of its gas sales to Europe, it would be 100% in Russia's favour, which I think I understood one commentator as saying. Because even if they take 100% of their natural gas imports from Russia, they have other trade leverages. They can make issue linkages and say, well, take the gas, but if you try to upset us about that, we can say stop selling X, Y, Z. And it might be technical know-how. It might be extremely, but it's a difficult quantitative analysis that takes years of research. And at one point, there was a lot of quite anxious reporting of the Ukraine war, talking about how the grain shortages were looming because of a Russian sort of blockade even on the ability for Ukraine to export it. But they also said that both Ukraine and Russia are the breadbaskets of the world because they produce so much grain. And they were particularly worried for Africa and the potential shortage of grain for Africa. I watched, though, after these news reports, a Putin speech, him speaking himself, saying that the exports of grain to Africa would resume from Russia, or be from Russia, but he also, if I understood the subtitles were correct, the exports of grain to Africa would be free of charge. They would provide Africa in this difficult moment free of charge grain. Could the mainstream media here not have checked and picked, instead of all this criticism about his money, could they not have checked and picked up on this issue instead of, as I've seen quite recently, concocting secret deals of the Kremlin, e.g. the Kremlin secretly supplying LNG, which will benefit Putin? Could they, it's just speculation anyway. And more about what would actually happen, well, for whatever reason, the grain to cease, a Putin-free grain, as it might be called. Putin can be sombre and even tearful. I've seen him in tears, at least once or twice. But the decision-making processes, both in Ukraine and Russia, during this European and Eurasian war, has to be described in detail. How does the decision-making process work? I know the Russian president is very strong and it can make decrees, but often they have to be looked to by the parliament. There's no mention of the parliament. It has a prime minister. I can't even remember the PM's name. I know it's not Vladimir Putin, although there are lots of Vladimirs in Russia. And yes, and you keep hearing Mr. Putin. Do you have to be so challenging and arrogant? They don't really say that in the Russian language. They use the patronymic. If you want to address him politely without using the sort of informal, it's extremely informal actually. You might think you sound incredibly formal and intelligent and great, and it's something Mr. Putin, and they can't even get his pronunciation particularly well pronounced. Can't you actually call him, if you're going to call him anything, Russian President Vladimir Putin, or if you're going to try and sort of use that jargon and sound incredibly important, can't you use his patronymic, which is his father's name, Vladimir Vladimirovich? That would be the way. You don't say Mr. Putin. I mean, it's just disgusting. It's only mainly men. Anyway, it just drives me mad. I even thought I was mispronouncing it all these years. When they say Putin, I've had to check and check and check, and I still feel mad. I thought even some regional dialects in Russian might say Putin. I've had enough of it. It's Vladimir Vladimirovich. You can't just, it's literally like flirting with him in Russian language. I had a train of thought also. Yes, and they need to make also predictions based on these. They have to look at what decisions are in the offing in Russia. They have to look at the bureaucratic processes. I can't do it all. I can't do it now. I'm ill and off work. I've done my best. I had a train of thought after looking at Larry the Downing Street cat online, because I saw the sort of news that he was sort of ill. I asked Alexa whether Larry was still alive because of hideous rumours that he was ill and on the brink of death. And the Alexa answer was that the outcome, I think it's Schrödinger they're referring to, the outcome couldn't be seen until the box was open. In other words, there might be an alive Larry in the box or a dead Larry in the box. Two possibilities. And I watched a news report showing Larry outside Downing Street, and the news report, I didn't understand a word of it, but they alluded to a kitten. Well, there was footage of Larry sitting, hovering outside the premises of number 10, and I thought he might have become a father. And I had no idea. They said the kitten, because of the kitten. And therefore I thought he might have been in exile because of the mum, and sort of some Toms can get, I think he's a Tom, and can get quite boisterous at that time with kittens. And I even had to ask if he was neutered, but Alexa didn't know this personal question for Larry. And I'm sure out there's a kitten for Larry, really. And referring back to this foreign policy influence, you need a very good diverse basis for trade. And it goes along with this basket comment. You need diversity, and even fascist regimes have to have international trade and foreign policy influence. And so they need diversity in trade. There's also a need for diversity in trade that would restrict some regimes in their international ambitions. I see most related to this in some form I see here most outlets in the UK singing from the same hymn sheet all the time. They all seem to agree. They all hate Putin. They are all keen on the same leader at the same time. And it's odd. I don't know why. Why? Because a small detail that differs from the mainstream is what all journalists want. You want to get that detail that makes your reportage completely different to the other competitors. And as such, with all this going on, and without recruitment, particularly of decent Russian speakers in the media, you can say a small detail there can lie in obscurity, dormant, and unrecognised, especially as men don't like lots of misogyny here in Britain. They don't really like the opinion of women. And this small detail can lie. It's very important to the press to have your own details. And it could lie in obscurity because all sides have to be considered. Like this cat, you don't really know what's in the box. You have to consider the alternative. And unless, of course, the information is perfect. And as one of a great tutor of mine at LSE said, and it was some relief for me, there's no such thing as perfect information. In other words, when I was a journalist, I got it down because I knew that it didn't have to be perfect because there's no such thing. But the more the merrier, I would say, when it comes to opinions. And Germany is saying they need to have all these discussions, and yet there's no talk on the TV media outlets about cancelling or sort of destroying the freedom of speech, even for this far-right party that's just done quite well in the state election. Yet they want to shut up Nigel Farage. When I say I don't know for sure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's broken the law. And there are lots of difficult anti-immigration comments coming from the leading parties. Yes, so as I say, it cannot be perfect information, but many voices are needed. And I know they don't like my voice because for all my lobbying and efforts to get through, they never reply. That's today's Light on London, and I've got more videos to come, and I hope that Larry is doing really well, whatever his fatherhood status and his neutered status, and our thoughts are with him if he's poorly. Have a great day or night.